What happens when a lonely night, with just a dog for company, turns into an unexpected adventure? As she navigates the silence of her home while her husband is away, a deep bond forms between her and Bailey, her loyal golden retriever. But when the lines of their relationship begin to blur, she finds herself questioning everything she thought she knew about love and companionship. Join us on this emotional journey filled with surprising twists and heartfelt moments. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more captivating stories. I never would have thought that spending time alone with my dog while my husband was away could lead to one of the most unforgettable days I've ever had. It all began a few weeks back when my husband left me and our dog, Bailey, at home while he went on a business trip. The house always felt especially still when he was gone, an eerie kind of quiet that went beyond just the lack of noise. Over time, I'd gotten used to it. His work often took him away for days or even weeks at a time. I didn't resent his job. It was what made our comfortable life in the suburbs possible. The big house, with its wide, open yard that often felt too empty for just the two of us. Or more accurately, for just me and Bailey. Bailey, our golden retriever, had been with us for 5 years, ever since we brought him home as a playful, fluffy pup. In the time since, he had become my steady source of comfort, especially when my husband was tied up with work or traveling far from home. Bailey always greeted me with his wagging tail, a soft nudge, and those deep eyes that seemed to understand more than any animal should. Tonight was one of those nights, the kind where the silence felt heavier than usual. I tried to drown it out with some background noise, music, a TV show, even an audiobook, but none of it worked. Dinner was just reheated leftovers, eaten alone at the table. Afterwards, I settled into the couch with a glass of wine. Bailey stretched out beside me like always. He never strayed far, especially on evenings like this. I reached down, placing my hand gently on his soft fur. "You're all I've got tonight, huh?" I whispered. Bailey answered with a soft exhale and a slow wag of his tail. What we had was more than a typical pet and owner relationship. He was like a friend who filled in the empty spaces left behind when my husband was away. Lately, I'd started realizing just how much I leaned on him. It wasn't just his faithful nature or his calm spirit. It was the way he looked at me, like he saw parts of me I didn't even know how to express. The night dragged on slowly, every minute seeming to last forever. I scrolled through my phone, looking at pictures of friends and their families, their lives so full of noise and activity. It made the silence in my own world feel even deeper. Bailey shifted, resting his head on my lap, and I found myself smiling. At least I wasn't completely alone. I ran my fingers through his fur, feeling the warmth from his body against mine. "You're such a good boy," I murmured. He responded with a slow tail wag and a happy sigh. These small moments made me truly appreciate him, the way he gave his love without question or expectation. It wasn't the same as having my husband here, of course, but it helped make the loneliness easier to deal with. The wine began to settle in, relaxing me as I sank further into the cushions. Bailey moved closer, curling up next to me in a way that made it feel like he was trying to protect me from the emptiness in the house. My hand slid over his back, and I started talking without thinking too hard. You ever wonder if he even notices how often he's gone? I said softly. I know he's doing what he has to, and I don't blame him. But sometimes I just wish he was around. Bailey's ears flicked, and he looked up at me with that knowing gaze that tugged at my heart. I knew it was silly to pretend he understood, but in that moment, it honestly felt like he did. You get it, don't you? I went on, still petting him gently. You're always here. The room fell even more still, with only the hum of the fridge and the gentle rhythm of Bailey's breathing filling the air. I kept my hand on his side, feeling the rise and fall of his chest. It was peaceful, exactly what I needed. With Bailey by my side, the silence no longer felt so heavy. In fact, it almost felt comforting. As the hours passed, I began thinking about the life my husband and I had built together. It wasn't a bad life, quite the opposite. We had a lovely home, financial stability, and a routine that functioned well enough. But something had shifted. Somewhere along the way, it started to feel empty. I couldn't say exactly when it happened, but there was a growing space between us, one neither of us seemed eager to talk about. Bailey nudged my hand with his nose, pulling me back from my thoughts. I looked down at him with a thankful smile. Thanks, buddy, I said, scratching behind his ears. You always know when I need you, huh? He wagged his tail again, his eyes shining with a warmth that made my chest ache. These were the kinds of moments that reminded me how much he meant to me, how deeply he had worked his way into my life. He wasn't just a dog anymore. He was a constant reminder that I wasn't completely on my own. I stayed curled up on the couch with him for hours. His presence made the evening feel less heavy, helped push the loneliness back. When I finally stood up to head to bed, I noticed I felt a little lighter. Bailey padded after me, like he always did, settling into his bed at the foot of mine. As I switched off the light and lay in the dark, I whispered, "Good night, Bailey. Thanks for being here." Then, as I said it, something unexpected stirred inside me. The look in his eyes sent a strange thrill through me. Maybe it was the wine. Maybe it was the ache of being so alone. Maybe it was just wanting to feel something, anything, after so many quiet nights like this. I couldn't say for sure, not yet anyway, but I would find out soon enough. And that realization led me to do things I never thought I would. The next morning, I woke to the sound of Bailey's tail hitting the floor. He always had a sense for when I needed help getting up. His bright eyes peeked over the edge of the bed, and I couldn't help but smile when he gave a happy little bark, like he was saying, "Let's get going." I swung my feet over the edge and reached out to ruffle his ears as he pressed his nose against my hand. "Okay, okay, I'm getting up," I laughed. Bailey ran to the door, pausing to glance back at me as if encouraging me to follow. It had become part of our pattern, his silent way of reminding me to keep moving forward, even when the house felt far too big and far too quiet without my husband. After breakfast, he made his way to the sliding door, tail wagging with excitement. I grabbed his leash from its usual spot, and his whole body shook with joy. A walk was exactly what I needed to clear my thoughts and shake off the feelings left over from the night before. The neighborhood was still peaceful, the streets mostly empty, except for some bird song and the low buzz of a distant lawnmower. Bailey, he remained close by as we strolled, his leash hanging loosely, our pace naturally aligned. That was one of the things I appreciated most about him, his calm and reliable presence, even when life felt overwhelming. Bailey had a knack for keeping me grounded, reminding me to stay in the present. As we passed the park, I decided to unclip his leash, and he took off joyfully, ears flapping as he ran. Seeing him so full of energy and freedom never failed to lift my spirits. I found a bench nearby and sat down, the sun warming my skin while I watched him play. He was chasing a squirrel now, more out of fun than determination. "You're ridiculous, you know that?" I called out, laughing as he looked back, tail wagging like crazy. He came running back, tongue hanging out, and flopped at my feet. We stayed like that for a while, the two of us just enjoying the quiet morning together. I started talking to him again, as I often did when it was just the two of us. There was something comforting about speaking out loud, as though he was a sounding board for thoughts I couldn't share with anyone else. "I don't know, Bailey," I said, reaching down to scratch his ears. "Do you ever wonder what life would be like if things were different? If we weren't stuck in the same pattern every day?" He looked up with those big, expressive eyes, and it almost felt like he was saying, "Go on, I'm listening." Of course, I knew it was silly to think he could grasp everything I felt, but at times like this, it seemed like he truly understood. "It's not that I'm ungrateful," I added. "We have a good life, but sometimes it feels like something's missing, you know?" I leaned back on the bench with a sigh. "Your dad's a good guy, but he's never around. And when he is, it's like we're just existing." Bailey gave a soft whimper and rested his head on my knee. Guilt pricked at me. "Sorry," I murmured, rubbing his head gently. "You shouldn't have to hear all this." But Bailey didn't seem to mind. He stayed right there, tail gently wagging, as if to say he didn't want to be anywhere else. It was times like these that reminded me how much I leaned on him, not just as a pet, but as a real companion, someone I could always count on. As the morning passed, we headed back home. I filled the rest of the day with small chores, the kind of tasks that helped time move along. Bailey trailed after me from one room to another, his constant presence a quiet reassurance. He'd settle in whatever corner I happened to be in, his eyes following me around the room as if to say, "I'm here, you're not alone." Later that evening, after dinner, I found myself on the couch again, Bailey tucked beside me. The emptiness I usually felt when my husband was gone was still there, but lighter than before. Bailey had a way of easing that void, making the silence feel less oppressive. Still, something inside me felt absent, and whenever I looked at Bailey, he seemed to tell me he could fill that space. I reached down, my hand running through his soft fur. "You're saving me, you know that?" I whispered. I don't know what I'd do without you." He let out a soft breath, his tail thumping lazily against the cushions. I smiled and leaned back, finally letting go of the tension that had followed me all day. His warmth next to me grounded me in a way nothing else could. As the night wore on, I found myself thinking more about what we had. The connection I felt with Bailey was more than just pet and owner. It wasn't only his loyalty or friendship, it was the way he seemed to see me, to sense things no one else did. He wasn't just a dog. He was a reminder that I wasn't alone, even when everything else felt empty. We stayed curled up together on the couch long after dark, wrapped in the comfort of each other's presence. This life might not have been what I dreamed of, but in that moment, it was enough. The days began to blur together, each one a copy of the last. My life had settled into a dependable but uninspired pattern. My husband's trip stretched on longer than expected. Again, I told myself it didn't matter, that I was used to it. But with every passing day, I leaned on Bailey a little more. One late afternoon, I stood at the kitchen sink, scrubbing dishes, while Bailey lounged in the doorway. His ears twitched with the faint sounds drifting in from outside. The golden light through the window filled the kitchen with warmth, but I still felt a chill inside. As I stared into the backyard, my thoughts spinning, I softly called his name. Bailey. He lifted his head, locking eyes with me like he could feel the change in my mood. "Let's get out of here," I said. Grabbing his leash, we headed for the car. There was no plan, just the desire to break away from the sameness. Bailey took the front seat, sticking his head out the window as the wind ruffled his fur. His excitement was catching. I found myself smiling again for the first time all day. Eventually, we ended up at a nature reserve outside of town. The walking paths were peaceful, with only the sound of wind in the trees and distant bird calls. I let Bailey off the leash, watching him bound ahead, tail wagging wildly. He'd always loved being outdoors, and seeing him so full of energy made my heart feel less heavy. I followed him down the trail, the gravel crunching under my feet, the fresh air settling my nerves. Bailey darted through the trees, pausing to look back at me every so often, like he was checking that I was still with him. His joy was contagious, and slowly I felt myself unwind. My thoughts drifted back to the life I shared with my husband. I believed I loved him, or at least I used to. Lately, though, that love had started to feel more like routine than real emotion, a partnership without the spark it once had. In his absence, it was Bailey who filled the gap. His constant loyalty soothed the unrest inside me. I came to a quiet clearing and sat on a fallen log. Bailey sniffed around before returning to lie at my feet with a contented sigh. I reached down to rub behind his ears, and he leaned into my hand. His steady, warm presence calmed me once again. "You're my anchor, you know that," I said softly. He looked up at me, eyes filled with a gentle understanding that tugged at my heart. It was in quiet moments like this that I felt just how deeply he'd become a part of my life, a steady presence in a world that often felt far too quiet. The sun dipped low, casting long shadows through the trees. I sat there with Bailey, wrapped in the stillness, Time seemed to slow, and everything beyond the trail faded into the background until it felt like only we existed. That silence brought a strange kind of peace, like the storm in my head had cleared, and all that remained was stillness. When we finally headed back to the car, I realized how much I'd needed that break. Time away from the house, the routine, and the thoughts that had weighed me down. Bailey walked beside me, matching my pace, and I felt a rush of thankfulness for him. He wasn't just a pet, he was my steady companion, my constant through it all, my steady presence, the one thing that helped the isolation feel less overwhelming. The ride back was quiet, the sunset casting the sky in soft shades of pink and orange. B curled up beside me in the front seat, his head resting gently on his paws, his breathing slow and calm. I reached over and placed my hand on his back, feeling a kind of peace I hadn't realized I'd been needing. When we got home, the house felt less hollow, not as heavy. Bailey walked in behind me, his tail gently wagging as he made himself comfortable on his bed near the sofa. I collapsed onto the cushions, feeling a calmness settle in. The relationship I had with Bailey was like nothing else in my life. Simple, dependable, and honest. That evening, lying in bed with Bailey curled at my feet, I couldn't help but think about the connection we had. It wasn't something easy to describe, but it was there, real and strong, filling in the gaps that my husband's absence had left behind. Bailey wasn't just a pet. He was my partner, my trusted listener, and in many ways, the one I felt closest to. And for the moment, that seemed to be enough. Or maybe it wasn't. Then came the next night, darker than most. A deep, pressing blackness surrounded the house, settling heavily against the windows. The air was thick, almost as if a storm was holding back just beyond the clouds. Bailey stayed close as I moved from room to room, his steps soundless but comforting. I didn't bother turning on the lights, choosing instead to let the dim moonlight guide my steps toward the sofa. I sank into the cushions, and Bailey curled beside me, his head resting softly in my lap. The silence was deep, the lack of my husband's presence more obvious than ever. My fingers found Bailey's fur, moving slowly without thought, my mind spinning. "You're all I have right now," I whispered, barely louder than a breath. Bailey gave a soft puff of air, his tail tapping the couch once. He looked up at me, his eyes glowing with a kind of knowing that tugged at my heart. I exhaled shakily, my hand pausing. "It's just us, right? You and me." The words sat there between us, heavier than I'd meant. But Bailey didn't flinch. He pressed in closer, his warmth creeping into the cold that had settled in me, the ache of solitude pressing harder. That night, our connection felt like something new, stronger, deeper than usual. It wasn't only the way he comforted me or sensed what I felt. It was beyond that, something deeper that defied reason. I leaned back and shut my eyes, allowing myself to fall into the stillness, the comfort of Bailey beside me. Time slipped by as we sat that way, held in the quiet. My hand moved to his head, fingertips tracing the soft curve of his ears. He sighed, long and relaxed, his tail swaying gently. The sound of his breathing filled the space, calming me in a way I hadn't experienced in weeks. I opened my eyes and looked down. He met my gaze, and for that moment, nothing else mattered. The room, the empty house, the weight of being alone without my husband. It all disappeared, replaced by just us. My hand remained on his head, fingers brushing through his coat as something inside me pulled tight, this link between us strong and consuming. Bailey shifted again, pressing even closer, his warmth chasing away the chill that had taken hold of me. I leaned down, resting my forehead gently on his, closing my eyes and letting it all wash over me. The feeling was unlike anything I'd known, part comfort, part yearning, something deeper I couldn't put into words. I don't know what I'd do without you, I breathed, my voice shaking just a little. Bailey nudged me, brushing his nose against my cheek, his tail flicking gently. It felt as though he understood, as if he felt the same invisible thread that had grown between us. Time ticked on, the world outside fading away as I remained there, wrapped up in the safety of our closeness. It wasn't just about him being here, being loyal and reliable. It was the way he saw me, truly saw me, in ways I hadn't felt seen in a long time. I didn't know how long we stayed like that, but eventually I leaned back, my heart pounding, my breath uneven. Bailey's eyes didn't leave mine, calm but steady, like he was waiting. My hand rested gently on his head, trailing down to the base of his neck. I searched for the words to explain what I felt, but none came close. There was no way to express the depth of it, how much Bailey had come to mean to me, how his presence had patched the holes in my life. So I sat there, hand resting on his fur, my heartbeat loud in my ears as I tried to understand what the moment meant. Eventually, I leaned back into the cushions again, my hands never leaving Bailey, who remained close. The feeling stayed with me, a quiet echo of what had passed, a reminder of how deeply we were connected, of how he had grown into far more than just a dog. As the night passed, a kind of calm settled inside me, not the logical kind, but something rooted deeper. Bailey had always been the steady point in the storm, the presence I clung to when everything else felt like too much. And then I realized just how vital he had become, not just as a pet, but as a lifeline, something that reminded me I wasn't completely alone. The house was still as I eventually climbed into bed, Bailey right behind me. He curled into a ball at the foot, and somehow his quiet presence made the dark feel less lonely. I lay in bed, thoughts spinning, but my heart felt a little lighter, a bit more settled. As sleep finally pulled me under, I whispered into the silence, "Thank you, Bailey, for everything." He was watching me in a way that made it seem like he understood, like he could feel my emotions, the longing for something more. His eyes told me he could be that something when my husband wasn't around. Something inside me shifted then. I wondered if I should give in to those feelings. Maybe not now, but eventually. I shook my head. I can't. I shouldn't. Though part of me wanted to. A part of me was curious, tempted to follow that urge, but I wasn't ready. Not yet. Morning light spilled into the bedroom, turning everything gold. I blinked awake, the weight of the previous night still lingering. Bailey was already up, sitting beside the bed, tail brushing slowly across the floor. "Morning, buddy," I whispered, reaching to scratch behind his ear. He leaned in, his breath warm against my hand. It was such a small moment, but it carried a weight I hadn't noticed before. As I moved through my morning routine, Bailey trailed after me, his quiet presence like a soft blanket. The night before clung to me, clear and full of emotion, as if it had carved a mark into my memory. I couldn't shake the feeling that something important had shifted between us, though I wasn't sure what it meant yet. After eating, I found myself back on the couch with Bailey by my side. The silence in the house didn't feel as sharp today, more like a safe place than a void. My fingers moved through Bailey's fur again as I let my mind wander, trying to sort through everything I was feeling. For years, I'd pushed my emotions aside, buried them to keep life moving without bumps. But Bailey had a way of pulling them back to the surface. The way he drew me out forced me to face the loneliness I'd worked so hard to avoid. His steadfast devotion, his silent empathy, it had been my anchor, one I didn't know I relied on until it was nearly gone. Bailey stared at me with that familiar gaze, and suddenly I couldn't hold back anymore. Our connection was too strong. I had to surrender. It was like he was promising to replace my emptiness with something thrilling. I moved closer, and he understood instantly. When our lips met, the tension between us was indescribable. His tail wagged wildly, and though I can't share everything, I'll say I lost control. I knelt, turned away, and wow. What Bailey did next surpassed anything I'd imagined. Our bond only deepened the experience, making it incredible. After what felt like half an hour, he finished, and I collapsed onto the cushions with a sigh. "What are we doing, Bailey?" I murmured, my voice soft with wonder and uncertainty. He lifted his head, those golden eyes locking onto mine, almost as if he was also searching for an answer. The day blurred into ordinary chores and brief moments of realization. I did laundry, tidied the kitchen, and took Bailey for a walk, all while our unbreakable tie weighed on me. Ignoring it was impossible now. As night fell, agitation buzzed under my skin. I snatched Bailey's leash and stepped outside, desperate for air. The night was sharp and fresh, traces of smoke lingering as we reached the park. Empty paths stretched before us, lit by street lamps and passing car lights. Bailey kept pace beside me, his stride sure and calm. I let him guide us until we reached a hidden spot, a dew-covered clearing, alive with nighttime whispers. Sitting on a bench, I felt Bailey curl at my feet, his warmth cutting through the chill. Above, stars glittered like broken glass, and for a second my burdens lifted. Bailey nuzzled my knee, and I ran my fingers through his fur, the motion steadying me. "You've never left my side, have you?" I said quietly, the words hanging in the air. He answered with a soft whine, tail thumping the ground. Such a tiny gesture, yet it flooded me with warmth, dissolving the last traces of isolation. Bailey wasn't just a pet. He was my companion, my stability, in an overwhelming world. Time slipped by as I talked aloud, my thoughts pouring out uncontrollably. I confessed my fears, my crumbling marriage, the nights his presence alone kept me whole. Bailey never left, his quiet support reminding me I wasn't abandoned. His love filled gaps I hadn't noticed were empty. The ride home was hushed, a meaningful quiet. Bailey dozed in the passenger seat, lulled by the road's rhythm. I touched his fur, smiling faintly. Back inside, the house felt alive again. Bailey joined me on the couch as I wrapped myself in a blanket. His company was all I needed, proof that loneliness couldn't truly touch me here. Leaning back, I idly stroked his coat. "You're my foundation," I whispered, voice trembling. "Always have been." He scooted nearer, tail wagging gently. Our bond defied explanation, but its reality was undeniable. As hours passed, the house grew still, the night swallowing the world outside. I stayed curled beside Bailey, his presence lulling me toward calm. Whatever lay ahead, I was sure of one thing. He'd be there, loyal, loving, unchanging in life's chaos. For the first time in so long, I felt clear, certain I wasn't alone. Drifting off with Bailey beside me, I knew we'd meet the future together. Later, as he lay there, doubts crept in. Was this okay? Am I strange, or is this common? I'm unsure. What do you think? Let me know in the comments. Thanks.